In recent months, there have been more cases of non-citizens who have been convicted of serious crimes in Canada receiving lenient sentences in order to avoid deportation. Here are but a few. A 34-year-old Ghanaian temporary resident was convicted of theft after a violent confrontation. He was granted a conditional discharge, with the judge explicitly citing his non-citizen status and the risk of deportation as a reason for the lenient outcome. A 33-year-old Nigerian man was convicted of breaching a no-contact order with his former partner. On appeal, the judge substituted a conditional discharge, citing the risk of deportation as a key reason. A temporary resident from India pled guilty just this June to sexually assaulting a woman in Prince George, BC. He only received 170 days of house arrest plus probation. The judge declined to put him on the National Sex Offender Registry, citing potential immigration consequences that could lead to his deportation. These types of rulings now happen so frequently that a judge in Montreal accused Montreal prosecutors of proposing candy sentences for criminals at risk of deportation, affirming that this is a common practice across the country. It's also worth noting that with regard to the Pham decision, the court explicitly ruled that consideration of immigration status does not constitute a charter right, a remedy, or a charter breach. In fact, the ruling did not mention the charter at all. Furthermore, it made it clear that the flexibility of Canada's sentencing process must not be misused by imposing inappropriate or artificial sentences, which arguably is what's happening all the time now. Doing so would circumvent Parliament's will, as reflected in longstanding immigration law, which requires that a non-citizen convicted of serious crime in Canada must be deported. That law is there for a reason. Giving non-citizens who have been convicted of serious crimes in Canada lenient sentences to avoid deportation creates a two-tier justice system where Canadian citizens are given harsher sentences than non-citizens who broke our laws. Not only is this hostile to the common good, but it sends a clear message to non-citizens, and that message is this: it's okay to break Canada's laws with impunity because non-citizens can stay in our country, cities, and communities even if they commit serious crimes like sexual assault. That stark, anti-Canadian reality was showcased in an explosive global news story last week regarding a classified intelligence report by the CBSA. The report showed that India's Bishnoi gang has expanded its criminal network into Canada, allegedly instigating high-profile murders, political assassination, and deepening the current extortion crisis. The report indicated that crimes committed by Indian nationals in Canada on temporary student permits skyrocketed by a whopping 8,800% from 2016 to 2024, while that country was ranked as the top source of foreign students charged with crimes. Between 2019 and 2023, 4,000 of those international students were charged with nearly 18,000 criminal offenses. A third of those offenses were considered serious or organized crime-related, while 97% of those crimes were considered violent. In 2024 alone, more than 13,000 criminal charges were laid against international students from India. I'd like to repeat that all to let that sink in. 4,000 temporary residents were charged with nearly 18,000 criminal offenses in a recent 4-year period. A third of those crimes were considered serious or organized crime-related, and almost all of those were violent crime. While at the same time, judges across Canada are still giving non-citizens convicted of these serious crimes lenient sentences in order to allow them to avoid deportation consequences that have long been set out in Canada's immigration law. That is insane, and it's disgusting, and it should be considered one of Canada's greatest political scandals and tragedies. That's because practices that let certain people commit crimes with impunity are corrosive to a high-trust society. It makes Canada unsafe, leading to a society that is less trusting to everyone, including immigrants who have come to Canada and work hard and play by the rules. And it makes our country even more fragmented. But yet, in a recent press conference, Prime Minister Mark Carney claimed that he had, quote, taken back control of immigration. Come on, we have 4,000 foreign students committing 18,000 crime who are likely to get sweetheart deals to avoid deportation. That is not an immigration system that is under control. Discussions about Canada's immigration system can't just be about numbers, which, with millions of non-citizens in Canada with expired or expiring visas, are still too high. We must also ensure that our immigration system preserves a high-trust society that respects our laws and that new immigrants are able to integrate into. That necessitates one law for all. In the past year, Conservatives have proposed amendments to legislation and other policies that would do the following: end the practice of non-citizens' immigration status being considered in criminal sentencing. This was a bill I put forward last year, which the Liberals voted against. Restoring real and full security and criminal vetting of foreign students and workers, amending the definition of serious criminality in the Immigration Refugee Protection Act to ensure serious crimes face serious consequences, ensuring ministers issue detention orders and law enforcement issues warrants when someone poses a risk to public safety, penalizing lies and fraud in immigration application, firm deadlines for judicial review processes, and transparent reporting requirements on warrants and deportations that Canadians can review. But all of these measures have been blocked by Sean Fraser, the Minister of Justice, and Lena Diab, the Minister of Immigration, and Canadians are living with the consequences of entirely preventable crime and disorder in our streets. Fixing these problems is not a difficult proposition. Change the criminal code. It only takes one line to stop the practice of non-citizens convicted of serious crimes from getting lenient sentences in order to avoid deportation. Implement better screening processes for immigrants, as the Auditor General herself recommended earlier this year, and change other laws to ensure that if a non-citizen is convicted of a serious crime, they are punished and then deported. It's worth noting that Sean Fraser, as Justice Minister, is blocking some of these changes after being the Immigration Minister who issued nearly 1 million foreign student permits with the housing, jobs, and healthcare system didn't have the capacity to absorb. And Lena Diab has done nothing to push him or the Prime Minister to put an end to this type of disorder. Earlier this year, the Auditor General found widespread, rampant fraud in the foreign student processing system. At that time, Conservatives called for the resignation of Ministers Fraser and Diab, who played significant roles, and this is a national scandal. It has to be looked at this way. Months have gone by, and the Prime Minister has allowed these two people to continue to destroy Canada's immigration consensus. How many crimes committed by non-citizens is okay for the Prime Minister? Is 18,000 enough? Is that what he considered to be under control? According to the Prime Minister, how many non-citizens convicted of serious crime should be allowed to stay in Canada? All of them? There must be consequences for this type of scandalous failure because of the consequences that it has on Canada's social fabric. The Prime Minister must fire the Justice Minister and the Immigration Minister and replace them with people who are willing to set the course straight. Canada's Conservatives continue to stand ready to work collaboratively to get policies passed with anyone who's willing to admit that these are problems and to fix Canada's profoundly broken immigration system.